Welcome to this session on Global Coalitions for the Ocean. I am Birgit Liodden, founder and CEO of the Ocean Opportunity Lab, and your moderator here today. We will now meet some of the change makers that are working in concrete solutions to protect the ocean from the different threats it is facing and how they are gathering to have a more powerful impact. We will have a keynote speech, a panel discussion, and a fireside chat. And I'm honored to introduce, first of all, our keynote speaker, Dr. David Vaughan, president and founder of Plant a Million Corals. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Many thanks. Well, my talk is going to be about a game changer in coral reefs. Many people have known that coral reefs are in deep trouble, and many people have heard of a technique to make large fragments in coral gardening for a few of the fast-growing species. But many have not known that there is a new technology that are both growing the massive coral species as well as for being able to and make thousands of corals in record. Now, sexual reproduction from corals, which has only been known for a decade or so, successful in areas where we've settled a coral larvae. However, you'd have to see it under a microscope on the left-hand side, or eyes you could see it with the naked eye. And this is also a very slow process. However, this process can produce a coral juvenile in the size of a coin in about 1 to 3 years. On one of these occasions, I made a mistake and accidentally broke this coral into small pieces and found that something happens to stimulate growth 25 to 40 times faster and be able to, as seen in this picture, take one piece of coral, break it into 4, as in the upper left. And these pictures going from left to right and top to bottom are pictures taken every week of the same coral. And you'll see by week 6 or 7, since they came from the same piece, they start to grow back together because they recognize each other as the same tissue. They also fast and fuse back together to the size bigger than it originally started in only a few weeks. This is the game changer for coral restoration, we now call microfragmentation. We can use a specialized and cut corals into hundreds of pieces or dozens of pieces, very tiny, and they are stimulated to grow fast, and we've produced many times more. So it's gone from a game changer of producing a few hundred corals to producing tens of thousands of corals that are now growing fast and in large numbers. So if we start with 400 elkhorn corals, we can cut those from the size of a golf ball into about 50 pieces and therefore make 20,000 pieces or microfragments. In as little as 6 months, they grow up to the size to be cut again. And if using 50 pieces, you should be able to produce 1 million corals in just 1 year. So in the tanks that you see on the left, you can produce and cut 1,000 pieces of microfragment corals, and within 6 months, they grow up to size. But if you let them grow a little further and they are next to each other, like the picture on the right, they actually fuse back together because they're from the same genetic strain. And so this can be a technique to actually grow new coral tissue on dead coral skeletons. This picture on the left in 2014 is 20 pieces of the same similar coral genotype. 2 years later, fusing together in the center picture. And the size of a 25 to 50-year-old coral which is usually the size they become mature. And this coral, in 5 or 6 years, actually, instead of 50 to 100 years, actually matured and spawned. So we have the potential to do this large and at scale. This is a coral head that was about 250 years old. We placed 250 different microfragments on it. And we're going to bring a 250-year-old coral head back to life. The coral bommy on the right, or large coral head, was probably 800 to 1,000 years old and passed away by bleaching events. And we planted 800 microfragments on it, and we'll bring back a 1,000-year-old coral head literally back to life in just a couple of years. And it's not that it's a new technology. It's a new technology in the size of the fragment that produces them to grow in large numbers and very fast, and allows us to graft new live tissue on dead coral skeletons instead of having to start from scratch. So this is a technology we've been transferring by way of workshops. However, many people are amazed at this new game-changing technology, but as demonstrated in large laboratories or research institutions, most thought that you needed a multi-million-dollar laboratory in order to be able to do this technology. Instead, we have designed a transportable coral nursery unit with all of the tanks, the pumps, the pipes, the filters, the valves, all put together and installed inside a shipping container so that it can be transported literally to any location, any island community, any place that has space to be able to start one of these transportable units. Literally a turnkey coral nursery in a box. Just like a portable classroom or a portable hospital, a MASH unit, this has all the pieces, parts, and equipment put together to be able to literally on day one transport it and open it up and start to put it together. By day two, communities help show them how to start running water and be making corals in literally 48 hours after arrival. This unit here is one that can produce 10,000 corals a year. So it's a pretty big potential for being able to use at scale. These coral restoration units are affordable. Instead of multi-dollar labs, literally something that can be put together in the $1,000s. And they can be adapted to whatever local community needs there are. Some communities will have the ability for adjacent salt water to pump. Some will have the ability for a saltwater well that is cool salt water and sterile. Some will have the ability to not have available electricity or utilities. So one of these units is actually going to be solar powered and off-grid. So it can be done in remote locations that may not have reliable or standard utility availability. It can be made and shipped by ships to any location that gets cargo, and then moved fully operational with all the components in place. So there's a difference that we can make, and these differences have been made in plenty of locations. Too many people have pictures, such as you see on the left, of what the reef has looked like in the past 3 decades, from beautiful reefs to looking like this left-hand picture. We can now, and with documentation, show that in just a few years, like this location in Belize from Fragments of Hope, that this is the same picture location 10 years later you see on the right. It's back to the way it used to be. And we can actually do this now. We can have the technology, we can have the transfer and education of this technology to local communities, and we can have each community be involved in their own local environmental impacts. By taking the existing corals that are alive today and are resistant or resilient to the conditions of the last 3 decades, we just need to make more of those naturally selected species in numbers, plant them out, and with your help, regain not just a reef that has those dozens or so species, but the full thousands of invertebrates and hundreds of fish that call these reefs their home and feed close to 1 billion people worldwide from the fisheries that are produced by reefs that are less than 1% of the bottom of the ocean. These pictures here, again at Fragments of Hope in Belize, show December 2010, 1 elkhorn coral planted in the upper left. Here it is just 1 year later in the center photograph of that lower left-hand corner, starting to grow. And here it is in years with that center horn coral now the size of a small bush, and the other staghorn coral species and others that have filled in the space with multiple plantings. This is possible. We can take the kind of pictures that we were used to in the past and turn them into the kind of picture before that, when the reefs were beautiful, like some of you remember. And the fish know it, and the fish will come, and the fish will have the habitat to provide all those resources for fisheries, for resorts and tourism, for habitat for all those species people like to catch and need to eat, as well as building back the storm preventing shoreline protections that reef provide for many island nations. With sea level rise and more storms, we need to build back our reefs to protect the people along the coast. And this can be done, and this can be done at scale. And with Plant a Million Corals, a new nonprofit organization, our name is not only our mission, it's our vision. It is not just a good start, it is the hope that many people and nations require. And with that, I will finish my program by saying thank you. There is the ability for us with technology that exists.
Yes, I just lost his hand. Okay, thank you. So thank you so much, David. I think this is truly the model for new regenerative models to save our oceans and the future. We are now going to dive into a great panel discussion focused on the need for innovation through startups, and the panel with the 1,000 Ocean Startups. So in a few seconds after the next jingle, I will introduce the panel for the 1,000 Ocean Startups Coalition. So welcome back. With me for the panel for 1000 Ocean Startups, I have Christian Lim from Blue Ocean Partners, Stéphanie Canac from the OceanHub Africa, and Clement Galic at the UNSEENLABS. And Christian, we have now heard about the importance of solving ocean challenges. And in order to solve these, we need to create new innovations through startups. Christian, can you elaborate for us and for the audience on how we need startups to bring innovation to resolve these challenges?
Yes, thank you, Birgit. So startups have one thing that is wonderful. They take an innovation and they turn it into a business, and a business that hopefully is profitable and therefore can generate revenues and attract funding to grow, private capital. And so through this mechanism, they scale solutions and they can do it very rapidly. Think a Uber or a Google. And so that's exactly what we're trying to do with startups. They leverage the power of innovation and private capital to scale the solutions. And we need this because addressing ocean challenges, it is very urgent.
And I will then direct the next question to Clement, because startups deliver innovation, but what are the key barriers and the challenges for the startups to scale? Clement.
Yes, thank you for giving me a few words. Yes, the major challenges for us to scale is first able to find the right service for the right people. Basically, the success of a startup like us is not only bringing a new technology, but bringing it at the right moment to the right person. And through typically, we are very happy to be backed by Blue Ocean Partners as the financial partners, and it opened us the doors of this coalition. And through this coalition, we hope that we will be able to find the right user, final user, the people who need new technologies to act for the oceans. And it's only by partnerships and coalitions and discussions with people very aware about these needs and this problem that a startup like us can succeed. Because if we bring technology with no users and not the right service, it's useless. So it's only by discussion and by discussion like today, for example, or other discussion with Christian or other people, that you can be sure that you bring the right moment, the right technology.
And Christian, as Clement says, to enable the startups such as his, we need to create a bigger systemic change. Can you tell me in a few short words about the 1000 Ocean Startups? What is this?
Yeah, so Clement just mentioned that to find the right fit between his products, his offering, and the customers, he leverages networks. And so one of the networks that we have created with Stéphanie and actually Tool also that you lead, Birgit, and others, is 1000 Ocean Startups, which brings together the community of incubators, accelerators, venture matching platforms, competitions, and venture capital firms across the world, from Sydney to Cape Town to Oslo, Paris, to San Francisco, which back ocean startups. I mean by these startups that scale solutions to solve ocean challenges, to regenerate ocean health. So there are 20 members, and they've done already a tremendous work. And so what we're doing through this coalition is bringing forces together so we can amplify our networks and share those networks with the startups to back them even better than we've done so far. So this is a coalition that we have created very recently as a group, and that is going to be launched officially tonight at 6 p.m. as a ecosystem highlight event of ChangeNOW, 6 p.m. Central European time, so in about 1 hour.
And I mean, this is it's a very practical example of putting SDG 17, collaboration for the goals, into practice. And more specifically, I wanted to ask Stéphanie, how does the coalition actually support the startups?
Yes, sure. So we help the Ocean startup achieve their full potential by bringing them expertise, network, mentorship, visibility, and funding. We work with the startups throughout the development stages because we go from competition incubators to all the way through fundraising with the VC funds that we have as members. So I think it's really an integrated approach that we've taken to support innovation throughout the development stages of a startup. And that's overall the coalition, and then each type of member has a different way of supporting the startups. I co-founded OceanHub Africa, which is an accelerator. So we come at a specific stage of development of the startup, and we bring really the support that will take them through investable readiness. So as we were mentioning before, for example, finding the right customer takes a bit of work, and we're just iterating with our startups, creating potential partnership with customers to do pilots, and making sure that we have the right product for the right customer, that we've tailored it the right way, and that we can go out there, raise funds, and then scale the solution, which scales the impact at the same time.
And Stéphanie now covered this from the kind of the accelerator aspect. Christian, would you wish to elaborate a little bit more on the funding sides and the status of funding ocean startups today?
Yes, I think this is, of course, funding is essential, but as Clement said, no ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneur and founder is just looking for funds. So all of us, I think, in this space and beyond, and certainly as members of the 1,000 Startups Ocean Startups Coalition, as VC investors, we look to bring not only funding, but also the support through networks and expertise, as Stéphanie was saying. So today, there are a number of pioneers that have seen the opportunity and are starting to invest in ocean startups. But what we see is that the space is growing, and therefore there is a need for more investors, and investors that will continue to invest to support the companies at the various stages of their development. 4 or 5 years ago, there were barely any venture capital fund in the space. It was mostly incubators and accelerators. Now there are few venture capital investors, such as us, investing in earlier stage, and then companies are maturing and starting to scale, and we need additional investors with larger investment tickets and different capabilities for more mature stages of development. So that's also what the coalition, I think, is trying to achieve. It's to shed light on the stage of, on the level of maturity of the sector of the ocean startups, show that it's already a fairly significant space. The coalition has backed already 168 startups like UNSEENLABS today, and this space is growing, and so we need an ecosystem that is growing as well to continue to finance them, support their growth and their impact.
Yeah, and because we know that, of course, there is a huge and growing number of startups in the early phase stages out there today, and we are working with industries that have less maturity with the collaboration of big industrial actors and the startup sphere compared to many other industries. But what are some of the key critical gaps that you see? Clement mentioned about it, but would you be wanting to go a little bit more into some of the more critical gaps that prevent startups from scaling today?
I guess with Stéphanie and Christian, we have perfect steps example for the going from startups. When you are very small startups without business in place and stuff like that, you need incubators to help you to imagine the future and your actual needs. Because when you are a startup creator, typically for me, it's my first startup. I was not no businessman, no entrepreneur. I was an engineer, and of course, the first steps you have to fulfill are the growing of the company, hiring human resource and stuff like that. The gaps. After that being said, the big gaps at one moment is the real access to the market. And the growing of the company regarding to this market. And typically, you can find that through incubators, which can help you to avoid the mistakes that everyone could do every day to kill your startup, and the finance and the funding. When you are talking about ecological fundings or earth or ocean saving fundings, as Christian said, a few years ago, you wouldn't find anyone willing to play with startups, with small startups, with incoming business to fund that. So the big gaps, honestly, to grow up is to acquire enough energy, enough money, enough knowledge to be able to access the right people at the right moment. Once again, I think it's the core key and the core activity and the true behind any kind of startup. So people like Christian, who have in one hand the funding for startups, but in the other hand the knowledge of the ecosystems and the knowledge of the needs of people like us, and who can bring us their knowledge. And it's very important for us to be surrounded. Just to sum up in a few seconds, just to be surrounded by the right people, which will give you the keys to go further these gaps. To be honest, funding is one of the biggest gaps we can imagine.
And beyond funding, of course, you mentioned about access to the market, and of course, working closely with pilot customers or innovation partners to really tap into creating the right solutions that the customers and partners are really willing to put the money into. That's key. And Christian, as there is a less mature industry when it comes to these innovation partnerships and the power players interacting with the small players. What does the established players really need to understand when it comes to succeeding with this big and small actor innovating and collaborating together? And how can they also take this really crucial, important role as pilot customers and test bed partners for startups?
So I think you're referring to the corporates who are established and are saying, the startups driving some innovation, and what role they can play to help accelerate this innovation. I think those established players, first they need to realize that change is happening, whether they want it or not. If they're not helping the change, one way or another, the startups that have really relevant innovations are going to succeed, and they're going to drive the change. And so if once you realize that change is going to happen, then the best approach is to partner with it. So in many cases, a large share of the innovation is driven by the startups because they are more agile, they don't have a legacy infrastructure or businesses. It is beneficial to partner with them. So this is an important realization. And then third aspect, it is very important to clarify the rules of the game. So when you first, if you invite a startup to co-develop a product with you as a corporate, the startup is bringing agility and knowledge and technology. And as a corporate, you're expecting them to contribute to improving your business and bringing it to the next level. And so for this partnership to work, you need to offer a clear path for this startup to be able to sell commercially. And so you need to clearly identify, specify upfront in the partnership what milestones need to be achieved, what deliverables are expected so that the trials can become a commercial, actually a commercial, then a contract, and on that basis, it can be a very successful relationship and partnership.
And what can you say about current kind of pain points in these relations, and how can the Thousand Ocean Startups Coalition help in kind of maturing the actors on both sides, facilitating better innovation partnerships, and taking away a lot of these hurdles and pain points and unnecessary pitfalls? Stéphanie, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I think that being a central point, it's good because we can leverage on the network that we have as 1,000 Ocean startup as a whole. I think, it's depending on the very specific need of a startup, then we can orientate it to potential ecosystem players. And the more we are, the more ecosystem players we have in our network. So I think it's also a matter of creating 1,000 Ocean Startup was a way for us to start collaborating and working more together. And I think that those kind of discussions are a very concrete example of that. And by getting to know what our different ecosystems are, we can tap into the other members' ecosystem as well. So I think that's a very strong asset of the 1,000 Ocean Startup, is making us work together and leverage on what we've created on our own as members. And I would say that it makes sense also because we are a global coalition. We are players, as Christian was saying, from around the world. And you might want to help a startup grow outside of your regional ecosystem. So that also makes a lot of sense just to cross borders. I would say that most of it.
Yeah. Christian, any additions to make from your side?
I mean, I think what I'd like to suggest is that actually that we show how concrete the solutions that the coalition is backing. And this is why we invited Clement, because of course he's just one of the many startups that are working for the ocean, but it's an illustration. And I was thinking if we could take advantage just to hear about the type of impact from Clement, the type of impact that already UNSEENLABS is achieving. That would be interesting. And just as we listen to that, imagine that this is multiplied already by 168, and imagine if it was multiplied by 1,000, this type of impact. That's
excellent.
Clement, you want to say a few words on?
Yes. I guess, but you already said the words. The word we are talking about is change, agility, and network. We know that the world is changing. The oceans need changes, and it's complicated for big firms to change their business model or their volunteer to go on market. Agility, small startups like us can easily talk with other startups worldwide.
Sorry.
We can imagine. Yes.
Sorry, just to clarify, because I was not very clear. I think you didn't have a chance actually to explain very specifically what UNSEENLABS impact is for the ocean. Okay. So maybe if you could just explain that in a few words, that would help the audience understand what ocean startups can achieve, just as an illustration.
Yes, sorry, you're right, Christian. Yes, so here at UNSEENLABS, in fact, we are a satellite operator, and we developed the ability to intercept from space the radio frequency emissions from all boats or ships. And it's not IES or beacon-based service. So basically, we are able to intercept and geolocalize the ships with their passive emissions. So in a few words, we're able to see almost 100% of the real human activities at sea, and more particularly the people who are not willing to be found. So it gives us a big leverage on to act against illegal fishing, protecting endangered areas, and all the kind of pollution at sea you can imagine. So in a few words, yes, we are able to see the real human activities and to give the end user, the people in need of this kind of immersion, the levers to act and to find solutions to protect the oceans and the seas.
Thank you so much, Clement. And Christian, we are getting closer towards the big launch of 1,000 Ocean Startups. And can you share with us what is happening later today? Where can people join? Yeah,
so this is a big celebration. So we're going to formally launch 1,000 Ocean Startups. It's going to be a 1-hour session at 6 p.m. Central European time today. So in 40 minutes, you can register very easily by going through the 1,000 Ocean Startups website. It's www.1000oceanstartups.org. And if you join us, you will be able to hear, of course, from startups like UNSEENLABS, but others also, which are really inspiring stories about how we can concretely scale solutions for the ocean. But you're also going to listen to another entrepreneur who is an ocean lover. It's Richard Branson. And you're also going to hear from inspiring speakers such as Prime Minister Erna Solberg of Norway, Mr. Vladimir Ryabinin, Executive Secretary of the Intergovernmental Oceanic Commission, who will speak about the Ocean Decade and the role of 1,000 Ocean Startups for the Ocean Decade, and also William Trowbridge, world record holder in the discipline of freediving without fins, and he will tell us about what he learned in the depths of the ocean, below 100 meters, on one breath, and how that led him to understanding the role of innovation to restore ocean health.
That is excellent, and we are all so excited. I really encourage everybody who watches here to join and stay on for that session. Before that, however, we will have a fireside chat with Daniella Fernandez from Sustainable Ocean Alliance. She will talk about the role of the Alliance in creating a global youth-led movement to address the most pressing challenges facing the ocean. But first, a small jingle. Welcome back. We are now ready for a fireside chat with Daniella Fernandez of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. And I'm so happy to meet you in person, Daniella. Before we deep dive into our chat, please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your organization and its work.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here. My name is Daniella Fernandez, and I am the founder and CEO of Sustainable Ocean Alliance. I actually started the organization when I was a college student at the age of 19 with the intention of bridging the gap of getting more young people involved in the ocean space and, more importantly, of building solutions for the world's the largest problems facing our ocean.
This is quite amazing. And it's only been a few years and you've grown so big.
Yes, it's been quite the journey. I graduated from Georgetown University in DC in the year 2017. And then I moved to San Francisco because I wanted to capture the Silicon Valley energy, the capital, the enthusiasm around building innovation and take it to the ocean space. So over the past 3 years, we now have young people in over 165 countries working on different projects around the ocean. And we've also supported and accelerated 29 ocean technology companies to date.
It's quite magnificent. And I think it truly represents this amazing example of the power of one, and also what happens when we bring all those power of one people together from the young generation. But tell me a little, because I mean, we truly are in a state in our time now where we need the individual change makers, but we also need the individual change makers to collectively work to transform our world for a better future. What is it that really drove this commitment, and how did you step up to this role?
Absolutely. Well, I had always been passionate about protecting our environment. You know, as a little girl, I grew up in Ecuador, so that natural ecosystem was always part of me. But when I watched Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, at the age of 12, that's when I realized that not only was it my responsibility, but it was my obligation to do something to contribute to saving our planet. Because to me, as individuals, it's our livelihood. As people, we have the responsibility to do everything, you know, in our ability to roll up our sleeves and use our skill set and use our talent and use our passion towards ensuring our own survival. You know, so I think to me that was something that became very clear at a young age. And then I just had this vision of bringing people together and of empowering my generation to become those change agents that you mentioned, because we all have it in us. We just need that support system and that mentorship and that, you know, the resource creation to enable us to take that leap of faith.
Yeah, and I've been in many occasions referring to my own generations and the more senior ones as the generation bridge builder, with the most important role now of supporting and empowering generation cleanup, which is your generation and the younger ones. And I mean, your generation and the future ones really have a huge cleanup job to do. Why haven't we already succeeded? Why do we need these global youth movements to drive this sustainability shift that my generation and the older ones should have taken care of?
Absolutely. Well, truly, it's about a different mindset, right? When you think about my generation and generations younger, we don't have to be convinced that climate change is real. We don't have to be educated about the severity of it because we're living it. We are living in a day and age where every time we turn on the news or I guess scroll through our feeds, we are seeing the impact of climate change are happening now. And so, you know, I think that from that perspective, we instead have to change the narrative. And instead of only educating young people on the problem, asking them the questions, asking them how they're thinking about the problem, how they can contribute. In terms of innovation, you know, young people have the ability to think differently about problems, to you know, think about how can the newest, latest technology support this progress. So I believe that it's not only about educating, but it's about giving them the opportunity, the you know, seat at the table to really share their own insights and contribute to the conversation, whereas in the past they haven't been given that opportunity.
No, I completely agree. And getting to that point, can you also tell us a little bit more about your specific initiatives and projects?
Absolutely. So to give you some examples, we support our youth leaders through our microgrant program, which is a program that we give anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000 USD dollars to these young people that are out there, you know, like within their communities, planting mangroves, right? Or building new, you know, seagrass farms. So it's really about the work they're doing with their with their communities, whether it is educating their community about recycling and building new infrastructures in towns that don't exist. And these young people, they would never have access to that capital in their lives, until maybe they grow up and get a job and, go through the motions of life. But if we're able to provide them seed funding early on, we can ensure that they have the ability to see themselves in the role of being a leader and actually bringing that idea to life. So that's why it's so important for us to provide these microgrants. Other examples I'll give you from our accelerator program. We have companies that are creating new materials out of seaweed. We have a company called Lollyware that is creating straws out of seaweed. We have a company called Cruise Foam that is creating a new type of material to replace styrofoam, right? Instead of using styrofoam that doesn't disintegrate and it just ends up, in our ocean. They're actually using chitin, which is the shrimp shells, to replace this material. And then we have companies building autonomous vessels to collect ocean data. We also have companies that are building new electric boats to decarbonize the industry. So it's so exciting to see how much innovation there is to disrupt every single sector in the ocean space that is currently damaging our environment.
That is, both so inspiring and something like a message that you bring through here that I'm so extremely happy to hear. Because, of course, the ocean industries as they work now are not really necessarily fit for the future. We are in a time of history where we need to extract much more resources, proteins, energy, etc., from the ocean at the same time as we're actually removing a lot of the necessary parameters for life to grow in a healthy way. And I would like to hear, because I really believe that, bringing more new change agents into this industry is also about showing the future opportunities, that where you can move from being a climate activist into becoming a business activist, building up the new solutions. And on the path of inspiration, which key accomplishments is it that you think best represent the role of your alliance and demonstrating why we need the young generation to really step up as problem solver in this blue-green shift? Do you have some favorite stories or examples to bring to the audience here?
Absolutely. So one example that I'll give is last year we created our Youth Policy Advisory Council. And this council is comprised of young leaders that have either policy experience or that want to be involved in policy. And what they did is they surveyed our entire Sustainable Ocean Alliance young leader community to ask young people, what are their priorities in policy and change making? Because when you think about it, oftentimes we hear these priorities from world leaders, from ambassadors, from CEOs, but you never ask a young person what they're seeing on the ground, what they feel is a priority for their own region. And so we built this advisory board, and now they're creating their own Blue New Deal in terms of what young people feel that should change in policy. And to me, that's so powerful because we're giving them a voice. We're giving them the opportunity to then go forth and interact with their own policymakers, with their heads of state, and make their voice heard. And this is something that simply doesn't happen. So that's something that I'm very proud of. In addition to that, in the past, before COVID, we used to co-host our Ocean conference, in that we brought our young leaders to this conference to, again, have that seat at the table and to be able to present their ideas, their projects and initiatives. And that level of access is something that, a young person can dream of. And at SOA, we enable that connectivity because we have already made the case to world leaders that they have to have conversation with the next generation. Otherwise, what they're doing isn't going to be taken up by us, right? It's rather going to be fought against. So it's all about an intergenerational conversation and collaboration that we're aiming towards at SOA.
And bridging those gaps are so important. And I think this also is about actually changing the imbalance that we see today in power and resources, because we see now that there's a huge frustration in the world's populations where you get this feeling that it doesn't matter what I do as an individual person because all the power are with big organizations or senior people. So something also about taking back this understanding and very clear view that we all have a responsibility to act, and it's not up to any big organization or some senior political leader to create the future. This is actually the task that is a shared task for all of us. And
Exactly.
I was also wondering, because of course you mentioned that you have been hosting these our ocean conferences, and of course this past year we haven't been able to travel. It has been quite extraordinary and really putting our society on hold for better and worse, challenging us all to adapt and to rethink our lives and our work. And I was really curious to hear from your side what has been the best experiences, and have you experienced a stronger push and mobilization within your network and alliance over this past year, where all of us as human beings were really given a sit out lesson by nature?
Absolutely. And, to touch upon the point that you made around, how can we change this mindset of young people from only feeling like they're the victims of what's happening around them to rolling up their sleeves and doing something. The other aspect of that is also to helping them understand that you don't need a marine biology degree to help the ocean, right? We can count on your expertise, whether it is on design, on fashion, a scientist, an educator, to contribute to this cause. So I think that's something very important to note, that we have to start changing the narrative that you have to go through, graduate school, you have to, have a master's or PhD to be able to have a role in this space. And that's just not the case. In terms of what happened during the pandemic, we saw an uptick of demand and of people wanting to be connected and to continue their commitments towards our ocean. We hosted a virtual conference, I believe it was back in March or April, that we brought together our entire SOA community. We had over 1,000 people on a conference a system such as this one. And what was so powerful was how much collaboration happened and how much access people had to one another through a virtual form that we didn't have before. So for us, it's just seeing the commitment and the reassuring of sharing best practices, of working together. We have some young people that are working on coral restoration in one area of the world, and now they're connecting to folks in Asia, right, with Europe. So it's been so powerful to see that level of collaboration that has spurred because of the pandemic, given that we have more access points with each other virtually.
No, that is really great. And I love the whole perspective of really taking back power. Because, I mean, it is the young generation that will live with the consequences of our abilities or lack of abilities to take action now. And then I can't help but thinking, and I also, 10 years ago, I built up a similar organization for young people in the maritime industry. But we see that while the young generation takes lead and really steps into the future with open eyes, it's also very clear that the established players and the seniors, that they need to step up their efforts to nurture and support Sustainable Ocean Alliance and other youth-led movements and their initiatives and their communities. And with your new accelerator for the later stage companies, you have obviously pinpointed the critical need for more investments and support in the scaling phase for ocean startups. But what else is it that you see is needed? Where are the current key critical gaps, and what do you need from the established and more senior people and structures that are out there and that may watch this session today?
Thank you for that question. And I'm so glad you asked that, because over the past 3 years, we've been serving our startups, understanding what obstacles they're facing, understanding how we can better support them. And one of the areas is truly around investment, right? There's a lot of programs that are supporting seed stage capital. You have a friend and family around, but then when you have companies entering the Series A and beyond, there's not a lot of capital there for them to land in. And so, it's part of our role at SOA to also educate investors on what the blue economy looks like, how they can get involved, how they can measure and track impact. So that's been a role that we've taken on in building an investor network and helping them understand the sector. But we also need that level of commitment from investors, right? And that level of desire to enter this space and work with these companies that really need their support. So that would be number one. Number two, on the policy side, we are actually working on a really exciting project with some European governments, which I will actually, I can't reveal right now, but I will tell you the premise of it. We have a lot of companies that are looking for pilot places to go and literally put their technology into the ocean. And oftentimes governments have a variety of restrictions, whether they are, the permits that they need to file, whether they are, the questions or the lack of understanding they have about technology. So we are trying to accelerate the understanding of governments to be able to support these companies instead of creating these roadblocks for startups and entrepreneurs that are trying to, to save our ocean, but they can't because governments don't have the flexibility to enable them to actually, put their pilots to test. So that's something that I would encourage government and policymakers to truly look at the obstacles that they're placing right now for entrepreneurship in the ocean space and seeing how they can be better by removing some of those permits or requirements that truly, stall the progress that these companies are making.
And one thing is on the governmental side and the funding side, and I think you bring up such valuable and really spot on issues here. But what about the established corporates? We talked about the established players before in the previous panel, but what is your dream scenario when it comes to how the big corporates can support the various needs and collaboration structures for your startups?
100%. So corporates also have such a critical role to play in being pilot customers for startups and working with them by opening up their R&D departments to them. We have so many companies that come to us and say, we don't have a way to work with corporates because either, they're sent around to talk to 5 different people to get to the point that they don't have a way to work with startups. So it's a waste of time for them to even start those conversations. So in essence, I would say that corporates need to develop a team that specifically works with innovation, with startups, with entrepreneurs, that has a clear pathway as to how to engage with them. Number 2, to be able to share resources, right? These corporations have so much, capital and R&D and equipment that these startups could definitely use and benefit from. So if there's a way for you to partner with a startup to be able to help them advance their technology, which at the end of the day may support your own corporate initiatives, I think that's something to be mindful of. And then 3 is, be a little bit more of a risk taker in terms of partnering with a startup as a pilot customer. We need the startups to get that buy-in from a corporation so they can see whether their product is going to work and support them and be a partner with them in fixing the problems that potentially come up, as opposed to simply being risk averse and not even wanting to work with these companies. So I would say that those would be some significant steps that corporates can take to support the development and the scaling of these companies.
Excellent input. And I really hope everybody out there will take the message here and act on it. I also wanted to ask you, as we are closing towards the launch of the Thousand Ocean Startups, how do you see that the Thousand Ocean Startups and the coalition partners, such as Christian's company, my company, and others, can also help enabling this bridge between your startups and your work and the established players, the financial community, etc.? What are kind of the dream scenarios there?
Well, I believe that visibility is so important in helping people understand the types of companies that exist, so that young people, students, can see these companies as role models, can understand what challenges they're facing, can understand what gaps can they maybe fill in, invent, and create on their own. So I do think that the role that accelerator programs that these coalitions have to play is around just exposing and giving, shedding more light into the amazing work these companies are doing, because you can only build something that you have been exposed to or something that you know about. When you look at the history of time in the ocean space, the ocean has really been seen as an actor for transportation, for exploitation and for exploration. And now we have to shift the narrative to tell the world, hey, the ocean is no longer going to simply benefit humanity, but actually we have to serve in regenerating it and building sustainable businesses for it. But again, if we don't have those role models, if we don't have examples of how change can be created, and these startups are exactly that. They are that, that example, that pathway that people can take to create new innovations. So I think that's the role that that these innovations and partnerships can build upon.
Excellent. I think that is the perfect segue, and thank you so much for our conversation. I really enjoyed it. That is the perfect segue to just remind everyone here about the launch, which starts in 15 minutes. 1,000 Ocean Startups, 6 p.m. Central European Time, the global coalition with a mission to scale startups that helps generating ocean health. Thank you so much, and see you later.
Thank you.